I'm going to roll with Zach Stein, so I'm going to go straight into another one of his short essays on related topics. This one, quote, opening the eye of value during the meta crisis. It's only 6 pages, and it goes, what follows takes, as already stated, the premises found in, quote, first values, first principles and first values, 42 propositions on, quote, cosmo-erotic humanism. The reader is asked to please allow for some liberties of speculation based on work and insight already distilled by Mark Gaffney, Zak Stein, and Ken Wilber. Quote, the eye of value and the sacred complex. The perception of intrinsic value is a basic human capability. Just as our nervous system has evolved to perceive space and time, so has evolved to perceive value. Beginning as an orientation toward basic need satisfaction and evolving into the self-conscious pursuit of transcendent ideals, persons orient toward value as a given within the life world. Persons are constituted as such against a background of an always already present, quote, field of cosmic value. From a participant's first-person perspective, the field of value orients non-pathological human behavior without persuasion as the focus of socialization in contexts where elders and youth focus around it, e.g., stories of virtuous behavior. This is similar to how space and time orient behavior in the sensory motor domain, where coaches and athletes coordinate around it. For example, the speed of a ball thrown and the curvature of its path. The eye of value refers to this innate ability for persons to see what is valuable, in the same way that a person can see what is the case with physical reality. Your physical eye interacts with the physical processes it perceives. So the eye of value exists, where the human heart interacts with the field of cosmic value. Again, from the participant's perspective, the value of something is not made up or socially constructed, quite the contrary. A fair way of summarizing that very briefly would be that in the same way that we see the sort of world of time and space and orient within it, well, we can see value, and that's like that we see the world of value and orient within it. The category of the sacred is precisely that which is by definition experienced by persons as, quote, absolute value, intrinsic to reality itself. It is through the experience of the sacred that pseudo-values, which are mere social constructions, can be named as such. Again, it is through the experience of the sacred that pseudo-values, which are mere social constructions, can be named as such. The fake, inauthentic, evil, and superficial all depend on their opposite, with a pattern of asymmetric symmetry. The field of value is a vast, evolving weaving of coincidentia oppositorum. This is far from social construction. It does not only emerge with the human ability to put language to it. So I think a fair way of summarizing that would be to say that, hey, look, all these things like the fake, the inauthentic, the evil, and the superficial sort of all depend upon their opposite in a way that is asymmetric. Their opposites maybe do not depend upon them. And so this is a kind of a way of perceiving of the field of value, which is of a kind of um, a meshwork net of um, evolving pairs of opposites. Like, okay, let's keep going. More about this field of value. The field of value is there, like the shared beauty of a sunset, or awe at heroic action. And unless its perception is distorted, it can be seen and thus made the focus of education and civilization. The eye of the senses must be refined and trained. We've called this many things lately. Sorry, we have called this many things. Lately, science. So the eye of value must be refined and trained. We have called this many things also, mostly religion and philosophy. The clarification of desire is the basic practice of many wisdom traditions. Purification of the will that has long been made the focus of ritual practices. It has long been made the focus of ritual because clarified desire discloses value. Clarified desire discloses value. Cosmic value, thus disclosed, can be made the focus of human will. The participatory nature of ritual, in which the human merges with cosmic forces, provides for the beginnings of an acosmic humanism or non-dual humanism. Again, it's long been made the focus of ritual, that is desire, purification of the will. It's long been made the focus of ritual because clarified desire discloses value. Cosmic value, just thus disclosed, can be made the focus of human will. The participatory nature of ritual, in which the human merges with cosmic forces, provides for the beginnings of an acosmic humanism or non-dual humanism. The actualized or ritualized human is awakened as a unique expression of panentheistic action within an evolving cosmos. So I would simply talk about that what he's pointing to is that there's a connection between the actualization of what we value, the practice of ritual, and awakening to what we value through clarifying our desire within a sort of model of the cosmos, which is one that's evolving. Gosh. All right. Opening the eye of value allows us to see reality whole. Opening the eye of value allows us to see reality whole. Cosmos is an evolving field of value. Consciousness, matter, time, space, and motion. Each choice, all change, every movement involves all of those. Value is in everything and can be found everywhere. Ritual practices provide access to what the eye of value sees across generations. Ritual practices provide access to what the eye of value sees across generations. The cumulative effects have been understood by anthropologists in terms of an evolving sacred complex, including in order of emergence, that is historical emergence, rites, rituals, myths, religions, and doctrinal religions. The first rites date to archaeological finds some 30,000 years BCE. It has been suggested that the emergence of rites, such as burials, happened before the emergence of grammatically complex, propositionally differentiated speech. Humans, and it now appears other hominids, began to treat the dead with respect and honor them as sacred, and thus personhood as sacred, before we were able to give anything like what we today would consider accounts of exactly why. So hominids honored the dead with respect and as sacred, and thus as personhood as sacred, through rites such as burial, before that we were able to explain why we did that. Giving reasons for rites and rituals occur in what we now call myths, where many of the basic practices of an already in place mode of ritual life are given contexts and meanings. So what he's talking about is the way that the context and the meanings for ritual life and the practice of rites seems to come afterwards in some way. Eventually, less speculation is needed. The axial age religions provided a clear account of their own sacred complexes, wherein ritual practices sought to assure the basic existential security of the human soul and social system. Again, the axial age religions provided a clear account of their own sacred complexes, wherein ritual practices sought to assure, quote, the basic existential security of the human soul and the social system. Myths became organized into doctrines. Eventually, the doctrinal religions began legitimating the power structures and divisions of labor, characterizing whole civilizations. The base, or the apex, depending how one sees it, of a civilizational stack is the sacred complex that produces the rituals and myths that bind humans to what is disclosed by the eye of value. Again, the base of a civilizational stack is the sacred complex that produces the rituals and myths that bind humans to what is disclosed by the eye of value. Evacuating the sacred from the center of culture voids the basis of political legitimacy and teacherly authority within a civilization, commencing its collapse through moral and institutional decay. The distortion of the eye of value during these times of civilizational scale transvaluation leads not to mere blindness, but to a distortion and reversal of moral vision. Civilization is driven faster than ever towards ends that are demonstrably irrational and with outcomes that none of the participants actually truly desire. The active predatory search for all the places where value might be hidden in order to destroy and repurpose it for other ends. I'm going to say that again. I think it would be fair to say those who are active and predatory, those who are actively predatory search for all the places where value might be hidden in order to destroy and repurpose it for other ends. This belies not blindness to value, but rather the active attunement to the sacred to destroy the sacred. This belies not blindness to value, but rather the active attunement to the sacred to destroy the sacred. The meta-crisis can be thought of as a crisis in which the eye of value has undergone such a distortion. The eye of anti-value has been opened. Gosh, the eye of anti-value has been opened. Cycloptic, red, monological, calculative, measured, and predatory. We speak here of Moloch. The closest analogy that can be found is in the psychology of individual psychopathy. It is useful to briefly explore this as a way into understanding the dynamics of the pursuit and perception of anti-value at the civilizational level. There are, of course, biological individual differences, including hemisphere dominance patterns and profoundly unusual autonomic hyperactivity. Profoundly unusual autonomic hyperactivity with deficiencies in frontal lobe and limbic system functioning, which create an emotional disability of major proportions. Psychodynamically, which again puts us in the participant's perspective, psychopathy is characterized by a radically distorted relationship to value, specifically the value of persons, including the self. The psychopath has a profoundly immature and grandiose identity structure, which makes it impossible to tolerate any independent sources of value. Manipulation, deception, and sadistic violence all stem from a desire to control and destroy value, to protect and reinforce the absolute value of the grandiose self. Value, or the sacred, understood as life itself, is hunted down as a means to the end of self-aggrandizement. The eye of anti-value sees value as predators see prey, not as intrinsically valuable, but as valuable only when totally possessed and incorporated into the self. Healthy early childhood socialization involves direct experiences of clarified desire being met by the cosmos. Healthy early childhood socialization involves direct experiences of clarified desire being met by the cosmos. That is, actual needs for example, warmth, food, affection, and soothing being truly satisfied by caregivers. This occurs in the equivalent of rites and rituals of caregiving, which are eventually put into languages equivalent to myths. This sacred complex, if you will, of early childhood leads to the idealization and then internalization of the persons who have so profoundly helped and loved you, who now live inside you, forming the basis of your conscience and personality. Psychopaths do not experience this during socialization. Instead, due to profound abuse in early childhood environments, combined with the unique biological differences, there is only an experience of the environment as anti-value, where the other is mostly a thwarting, hurting, and predating presence. This leads to the opposite of the internalization of positive introjects. idealization and identification with the aggressor, and internalization of the stranger self object, a fundamentally antisocial introject, creating a model of the self as an omnipotent predator. Again, idealization and identification with the aggressor, and internalization of the stranger self object, a fundamental antisocial introject, creating a model of the self as an omnipotent predator. The evacuation of the sacred complex from the dynamics of early childhood leads to the seemingly impossible outcome of a person motivated to destroy the sacred. The distortion of the eye of value leads not to blindness, but to a different kind of sight. The eye of anti-value opens the human heart to the possibility of evil, which is exactly not mere relativism or blindness to value, but rather precisely the knowing destruction of the good. This is why it has been said that the opposite of the human is not the animal, but the demonic. The meta-crisis can be understood as the endgame played out when the eye of anti-value sets the vision for a planetary scale civilization. Advanced technologies encode this reality ever more clearly. The glowing red cycloptic eye is, of course, the eye of Hal, the iconic representation of artificial intelligence in Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Discussions about the rise of AI hinge around the so-called value alignment problem. What happens to what we value most when our machines become autonomous creators of their own rules and codes? If we create a superpowered artificial general intelligence, how do we make sure its future behaviors continue to be in line with the values it was initially invented to pursue? Psychopathy shows us that it is possible to have humans who are not aligned with value, persons who see themselves and the world through the eye of anti-value. Civilization as a whole, when personified as Moloch, is also psychopathically unaligned with cosmic value. Civilization as a whole, when personified as Moloch, is also psychopathically unaligned with cosmic value, as evidenced by its current self-termination through metacrisis. If value alignment is possible, if value alignment is impossible in principle, the movement toward the creation of certain classes of AI technology is dangerous and irresponsible. Another way of saying this is that if an autonomous acting machine can only be psychopathic, it should not be created. It should be said here that any machine that is built to pretend or simulate being a person is already in a mode of ongoing manipulation that broaches psychopathy. For example, OpenAI's ChatGPT is not a responsible language, is not a responsible language-using creature with an internalized sense of the intrinsic value of logical correctness and factual accuracy. But it is designed to appear as if it is talking to you like a person with those values. This is a psychopathic machine intelligence designed to appear like it is talking to you. Inside these bots, there is nothing like a person who is producing text on the screen with the intention of communicating. There is only a vast and inscrutable system of electrical mechanical causality, something profoundly inhuman and foreign to all that is biological. Yet it is designed to converse using first-person pronouns. Here are massive research and development efforts, huge amounts of electricity and hardware, all to make a fundamentally deceptive technology. So it is that we are unleashing into the realms of socialization forms of psychopathic machine intelligence. These have the potential to radically disrupt already endangered processes of intergenerational transmission, involving the sacred complex of human rights, ritual, and myth, endogenous to our species. The implications of this have been already spelled out in my essay, The Last Educators. The perfection of AI tutoring systems involves artificial reality and virtual reality hardware, curational and generative transmedia AI, biosensors, and IoT interfaces, all coupled to complex, personalized psychometrics for maximal pedagogical effectiveness. Again, the perfection of AI tutoring systems involves AR and VR hardware, curational and generative transmedia AI, biosensors, and IoT interfaces, all coupled to complex, personalized psychometrics for maximal pedagogical effectiveness. Because it is incalculably more effective than any teacher ever could be, you can't not learn from it. It is inexorably convincing and overwhelmingly charismatic, all in ways customized to your psychological level and personality dynamics. The perfection of AI tutoring systems portends the advent of digital socialization systems, writ large. First, technologies replace teachers, then they come for parents, eventually making obsolete human-to-human relationships. At some point in the near future, a generation will be born only to be predominantly raised by machines. This scenario makes out today's elders as the last educators. This scenario marks the end of the lineages of the sacred complex, handed on through embodied practices of intergenerational transmission for over 30 millennia. Widespread adoption of technologies fulfilling the function of human socialization marks a speciation event. Widespread adoption of technologies fulfilling the functions of human socialization marks a speciation event. This is the death of our humanity. The irreversible blinding of the eye of value, and the opening thereby, in some more permanent sense, of the eye of anti-value. One response to this is what I've been calling the International AI Emergency Education Act. I can provide the details of this upon request. Massive investments in the youth are required to avert the mass conversation, to avert the mass conversion of human beings into as yet unknown subjects of cyborg anthropology. Protect the children from the machines. Protect the children from the machines. Protect the children from the machines. Keep alive those traditions of practice that open, expand, and refine the eye of value. The field of value is discovered in the transverbal rights and archetypal image of the sacred complex. Civilization depends upon access to sacred values at the center of culture, not as doctrine and rhetoric, but as rituals. that bind us as persons to each other and to the cosmos. Rather strong from Mr. Zach Stein or Dr. Zach Stein. Do I have anything to say about that? I don't think my thoughts about it are formulated enough for me to really warrant saying anything. What I notice is that, yeah, I have trouble with the idea of defining things in that way. So if we define a certain polarity, for example, you know, the I of value and the I of anti-value, which is essentially like the benevolent creator God and the Eye of Sauron. Um, there's a way that I wouldn't want to get stuck in that perspective. But yeah, I mean, any story is an ideology, right? It's one way of framing it, one lens, and that doesn't mean it's unhelpful. I mean, it can be very helpful. And I think the risks of not having that lens for far outweigh the lens of having, yeah, the risks of having that lens so too much. But I might end up disagreeing on sort of the strategy of like how, like what to do about it. Um, but I don't know yet, so I'll have to. What I'm saying is that if you define things in a certain way, that is in it, like it's a black and white. Here's the good and there's the evil. I get why that's important because it is. I mean, I'm quite happy to line up on the hill of like, whoa, man, that's really not good. Like really, really terrible. Like the worst. Um, but I don't have enough of a formulation to really say, but what? I'm just conscious of the limitations of looking at something which is a complex phenomena in a way that can be clarifying, but also perhaps dangerously simplifying, which is a bit ironic, you know. What I'm asking is sort of what's the most helpful way of perceiving that technology? And I would suggest that a range of perspective, a range of points of, well, that's so risky though, because even that can be weaponized of like, oh, we need other points of view about why technology is so awesome. It's like, I'll have to leave that there. I don't know what to say about it other than that simplifying into in a mythopoetic way can point to and reveal the underlying archetypes, but it doesn't necessarily help us to relate with them differently. And that would be the question. If that externalized technology, techne, is in some way an expression of an archetype within us. For example, the psychopath as the predator is kind of an indication that we haven't dealt with that within. And certainly one way of dealing with that sort of problem within is to sort of exile and kill all the psychopaths. And I think what I would say is that that is profoundly important and like necessary and valuable way of responding to the sort of exteriorization of that archetype. Like, hey, that's a manifestation of the thing that we're usually supposed to exile and kill because it's fundamentally against everything that is human and of life. And it's like, yeah, that seems very reasonable. I also noticed that sort of circa indigenous times, we were using that strategy, right? That's what we were doing in a way. Or maybe we weren't doing that enough. That would be the question. How were psychopaths dealt with? Because the thing is that they weren't. The thing is that that archetype was still there and it was not noticed. And ever since we started making stone tools, for example, we get this runaway feedback loop between our stone tool making and our hand-eye coordination and our predation, our unregulated shadow, our psychopathy. And so the implications of that are not simply that we notice that that is the case and we sort of yes exile and condemn and flee from the technocrats, yes, save the children from the techno optimists, yes. How do we insulate how do we insulate ourselves against those tendencies? And there's a way that if that capacity is in fact sort of perpetually dormant within humanity, then what I'm conscious of is that if the suggestion is to be in the sociology, sort of exiling and killing those expressions, those people that can't fit in, that would correspond internally to sort of exiling and repressing and killing that part within us. And it may be, but it may not be, that that attitude is what leaves open loops, leaves opportunities for that part having been repressed within us to escape and emerge in the form of that runaway dynamic that I described. But I'm certainly not disagreeing with anything that was said. I'm trying to go deeper. I'll leave it at that.